The city was bathed in golden light as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows on the towering buildings of Manhattan. Nathan Sterling sat in his corner office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, swirling the amber liquid absent-mindedly as he stared out at the city he had conquered. His office, minimalist, modern, and immaculate, was a direct reflection of the man himself. No unnecessary clutter, no distractions. A sharp knock at the door broke the silence. "Come in," Nathan said, not turning around. The door opened, and Eleanor Monroe stepped in. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, she was every bit as composed and calculated as her employer. Nathan trusted Eleanor more than anyone. She was sharp, discreet, and most importantly, she understood how he operated. "You asked me to look into potential candidates," Eleanor said, placing a file on his desk. Nathan finally turned, setting his glass down. "And I've compiled a list of options," she continued, flipping through the file. "Surrogacy agencies, private arrangements, even some off-the-record opportunities. However, given your specific conditions, no emotional ties, no long-term obligations, traditional routes may not be ideal." Nathan leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I'm not interested in a legal battle down the line. I need someone who understands the terms and will walk away when the contract ends." Eleanor nodded. "Which is why I took the liberty of considering alternative options." She pulled out a separate folder and slid it across the desk. Nathan picked it up, raising an eyebrow as he skimmed through the details. The profiles were different from what he expected. These weren't women actively seeking surrogacy. They were women in dire situations, women who had nothing to lose and everything to gain from such an arrangement. "This one in particular caught my attention," Eleanor said, tapping a specific page. Nathan glanced at the name. Samantha Hayes, 28th, unemployed, no known family, formerly a student at Parsons School of Design, currently homeless. He frowned, scanning the rest of the file. A former artist, promising career cut short, a history of financial struggles. He looked at the attached photo, a candid shot of a young woman sitting on a sidewalk, sketching on a crumpled piece of paper, completely absorbed in her work. "You're suggesting I hire a homeless woman to have my child?" Nathan asked, his tone unreadable. Eleanor met his gaze evenly. "I'm suggesting that she fits your criteria. No ties, no attachments. She needs stability. You need an heir. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." Nathan set the folder down, considering. He had spent his life making calculated investments, and this was, in essence, no different. If anything, it was a cleaner deal than the messy affairs of relationships and trust. "Where can I find her?" he asked. Eleanor pulled out a small note. "She's usually at Times Square, near 46th Street, every evening." Nathan exhaled, glancing at his watch. 6:47 p.m. There was no harm in looking. The streets were alive with flashing lights and the murmur of tourists, street performers, and the occasional distant siren. Nathan's sleek black car pulled up to the curb, but he didn't step out immediately. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on her. She was exactly where Eleanor had said she would be, sitting cross-legged on the pavement, hunched over a sketchbook, her brown hair falling in loose waves around her face. She wore a tattered hoodie, sleeves pushed up to reveal paint-stained fingers. Around her were scattered drawings, some crumpled, some half-finished, all breathtaking. Nathan watched her for a moment. Something about the way she was completely absorbed in her art, indifferent to the world around her, was strangely captivating. He stepped out of the car. As he approached, she must have sensed him because she looked up, her piercing green eyes locking onto his. "If you're looking to buy a drawing," They're not for sale, she said before he could speak. Nathan smirked. That's not why I'm here. She raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. You want to offer me a job? Some charity case so you can feel good about yourself? Not exactly, Nathan replied smoothly. I'm offering you something far more valuable. She laughed dryly, standing up. Oh, I can't wait to hear this one. Nathan took a step closer, his voice steady. I want you to have my child. Silence. For a long moment, Sam simply stared at him, as if waiting for the punchline. Then she let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You're joking. I never joke about business, Nathan said. Her expression hardened. Let me get this straight. You, some rich, arrogant businessman, want me, a homeless woman, to what? Carry your child? Like some kind of breeding deal? Nathan remained unfazed. Precisely. Sam scoffed, crossing her arms. Wow. And here I thought I'd heard every crazy proposal out there. Before you dismiss it, you should know what I'm offering, Nathan continued. A place to stay, financial security, full medical coverage, and at the end of it, a sum large enough to change your life forever. Sam hesitated. For the first time there was something in her eyes, doubt, consideration. You think money can buy anything, don't you? She muttered. Nathan tilted his head slightly. Not anything, but it can buy opportunity. And right now, I'm offering you one. She clenched her jaw, looking away. Her stomach growled, a cruel reminder of the reality she was living in. Nathan saw the flicker of hesitation and knew he had her attention. You don't have to decide now, he said, but you have 24 hours. He handed her a business card. When you're ready, call me. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving Sam standing on the sidewalk, gripping the card tightly. For the first time in a long time, she had a choice, and she wasn't sure if that terrified her or tempted her. Sam sat on the cold pavement of Times Square long after Nathan had driven away, his business card still clutched tightly in her hand. The flashing neon lights above her cast strange, shifting shadows across the cracked cement, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing. Of all the insane things she'd heard in her life, this had to be the most absurd. A millionaire offering her, a homeless woman, money, housing, stability, in exchange for having his child. She wanted to laugh, or maybe scream. It was dehumanizing, insulting, and borderline insane. Who did he think he was? But then, her stomach growled again, cutting through her indignation like a blade. Reality hit hard. She was homeless. She was starving. And the truth was, she hadn't had an opportunity, any opportunity, in a long, long time. Was this really any worse than the daily struggle of surviving on the streets? She exhaled sharply, shoving the card into the pocket of her hoodie. She wouldn't think about it now. She needed to focus on tonight, on finding a safe place to sleep, on making it through one more day. Yet as she curled up in the doorway of an abandoned building, pulling her worn-out hoodie tighter around her, she couldn't stop the thoughts from creeping in. Nathan Sterling's words haunted her. A place to stay, financial security, full medical coverage, and at the end of it, a sum large enough to change your life forever. What if this was her way out? What if this was the chance she'd been waiting for? Sam woke to the sound of sirens and the distant hum of morning traffic. She hadn't slept much, and her body ached from the cold cement beneath her. With a groan, she pushed herself up, rubbing at her tired eyes. Her fingers brushed against the business card in her pocket. Her heart pounded. Could she really do this? She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the wave of uncertainty that threatened to overwhelm her. There was only one way to find out. With shaky hands, she pulled out the card and dialed the number. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Nathan Sterling." Sam swallowed hard. "It's me," she said. "Samantha Hayes." A pause. Then, "I assume you've made your decision." She hesitated, gripping the phone tighter. "I want to talk. Face to face." Another pause. Then, "Eleanor will send a car for you. Be ready in an hour." The line went dead. Sam stared at the phone, her pulse hammering in her ears. There was no turning back now. An hour later, a sleek black car pulled up at the corner where Sam had been waiting. The driver, a middle-aged man in a suit, didn't ask questions. He simply opened the door for her, nodding in greeting. Sam slid into the back seat, her fingers twitching against her jeans. She half expected to be taken to some towering corporate building. But instead, the car wound through the streets until it pulled up outside an upscale cafe in Midtown. Nathan was already waiting inside, seated at a corner table with a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. He barely looked up as she approached. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Sam hesitated before sinking into the seat, her eyes narrowing. "So, this is how you do business? Summon people like they're your employees?" Nathan leaned back, studying her. "This isn't a normal business deal. But yes, I prefer efficiency." She scoffed. "Well, I prefer not being treated like a contract waiting to be signed." He smirked. "Then let's cut to the chase. Are you interested or not?" Sam's throat went dry. She had expected him to ease into the conversation, to offer some kind of pleasantries. But of course, he was Nathan Sterling, direct, calculated, and unemotional. She took a deep breath. "I want to know everything before I agree to anything." Nathan nodded, pulling a folder from the leather briefcase beside him. "Here are the terms." He slid it across the table. Sam hesitated before opening it. The contract was meticulous. It outlined every detail. Her medical expenses would be covered. She would be provided a private residence for the duration of the pregnancy. She would receive personal security. And upon birth, she would be compensated with $2 million. She nearly choked on her coffee. "$2 million?" she whispered. Nathan barely blinked. "I assume that's sufficient?" Sufficient? It was life-changing. Her mind reeled. With that money, she could start over. She could leave this life behind. No more sleeping on sidewalks. No more wondering where her next meal would come from. But at what cost? Her stomach twisted. "You expect me to just give up my baby and walk away?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Nathan's expression didn't change. "Yes, that's the agreement." Sam exhaled shakily, staring at the papers in front of her. It was insane. It was wrong. And yet, what other choice did she have? Nathan watched her carefully, reading the storm of emotions on her face. "You have 24 hours, he said, his tone even. "If you don't agree by then, the deal is off." Sam's jaw tightened. Why the rush? He took a slow sip of his coffee before answering. "Because I don't waste time." Her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "You really don't do emotions, do you?" Nathan didn't flinch. "No." Sam let out a humorless laugh. "I should say no just to spite you." "But you won't," Nathan said smoothly, leaning forward slightly. "Because you know this is the best chance you'll ever get." Sam hated that he was right. She hated the way he could see straight through her. But more than anything, she hated the truth, that she was considering it. She shoved the contract back toward him. "I need time." Nathan didn't argue. He simply picked up his briefcase, slid the folder inside, and stood. 24 hours, he reminded her. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the cafe. Sam sat there, staring after him, feeling as though she had just made a deal with the devil. That night, Sam wandered the streets, her mind a battlefield of thoughts and emotions. Could she really do this? Could she carry a child knowing she would have to give it up? Could she trust a man like Nathan Sterling? She didn't know. But as she curled up in an alleyway, listening to the distant honks of New York traffic, she thought about the alternative. She thought about starving, about freezing in the winter, about never getting a second chance. And when the sun rose over the city skyline, painting the streets in soft gold, she already knew what she had to do. She pulled out her phone, took a deep breath, and dialed. It rang once, twice. Then, Nathan Sterling. She swallowed. I'll do it. A pause. Good, Nathan said. Be ready in an hour. The line went dead. Sam stared at her phone, her heart hammering. This was it. Her life would never be the same again. The black car pulled up in front of a towering glass skyscraper in Upper East Side, Manhattan. Sam sat stiffly in the back seat, her hands clenched together in her lap, as she stared at the reflection of herself in the tinted windows. This was really happening. The building before her was not just any luxury apartment complex. It was Sterling Tower, one of the most exclusive residential buildings in New York City, and more importantly, Nathan Sterling's home. The driver opened the door for her. Mr. Sterling is expecting you. Sam hesitated, her stomach twisting with uncertainty. This is a mistake. You don't belong here. He's going to control every aspect of your life. But then she thought about last night, sleeping on the freezing cement, with nothing but her torn hoodie for warmth. She needed this. Squaring her shoulders, she stepped out of the car. The moment Sam entered the penthouse, she felt completely out of place. Glass walls framed the skyline of New York City, stretching endlessly before her like a postcard. Everything in the penthouse was pristine, modern, and cold. Black leather furniture, polished marble floors, and abstract artwork that probably cost more than she had ever seen in her life. It smelled of expensive cologne and control. Nathan stood in the middle of the living room, dressed in a crisp navy suit, sipping his coffee as if he hadn't just bought a woman's womb. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. You're late. Sam's jaw tightened. I wasn't aware this was a job interview. Nathan didn't blink. Everything I do runs on efficiency, Miss Hayes. If you're going to live here, you follow my schedule. Her fingers curled into a fist. Right. Of course. Wouldn't want to inconvenience you while I'm growing a human inside me. Nathan sighed, setting his coffee cup down. I assume Eleanor went over the rules. Sam crossed her arms. Yeah. No drinking, no smoking, no stress, no staying up late. My entire life is now a controlled science experiment. I get it. Nathan smirked. Good. Then this should be easy for you. She scowled. Easy? I don't think that's the word I'd use. Nathan didn't respond. Instead, he turned and motioned toward the hallway. Stephanie will show you to your room. Make yourself comfortable, though I doubt you will. Sam bit back a snarky remark. This was going to be a long 9 months. The suite Nathan had assigned her was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. The walls were decorated in muted grays and soft golds, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. It felt sterile, like a hotel room, not a home. Stephanie, a petite woman in her late 30s, with sharp brown eyes, lingered by the door. Mr. Sterling prefers structure. If you need anything, let me know. Sam let out a humorless laugh. You mean, if I need permission? Stephanie hesitated. Let's just say, he values control. Sam rolled her eyes. Yeah, I got that. Stephanie gave a small, knowing smile before excusing herself. Alone, Sam wandered the room. her fingers trailing across the velvet bedding. What the hell have I gotten myself into? Then she noticed a door, one that was locked. Curious, she reached for the handle. No luck. A spike of unease settled in her chest. What was Nathan hiding? That night, Sam couldn't sleep. She stood by the massive window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Then, a sound caught her attention. Voices. Moving silently, she stepped into the hallway following the muffled conversation coming from Nathan's office. Through the slight gap in the door, she saw him standing there, speaking on the phone. His usual mask of calm detachment was gone. His jaw was tight, his fingers gripping the edge of his desk, his eyes dark, with something that almost looked like pain. No, I don't want to talk about it, because it doesn't change anything. I'm done with this conversation. Then, he hung up, exhaling sharply. For the first time, Nathan Sterling looked human. Sam should have walked away, but she didn't, because for the first time, she wanted to understand him. The next morning, Sam and Nathan crossed paths in the penthouse kitchen. "Rough night?" she asked, leaning against the counter. Nathan didn't acknowledge her at first. Then, "Eavesdropping, Miss Hayes?" She shrugged. "Hard not to when you're yelling at someone at 2 in the morning." Nathan studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he answered, "It was about my family." Sam raised an eyebrow. "The same family you pretend doesn't exist." Nathan's lips pressed into a thin line. "I prefer not to discuss personal matters." Sam tilted her head. "So, why did you—" Nathan hesitated. "Because I don't know why you're still standing here." Sam smirked. "Maybe because I like making you uncomfortable." Nathan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You're insufferable." "And you're a control freak," she shot back. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then, unexpectedly, Nathan chuckled. It was quiet, almost reluctant, but real. "Maybe this won't be as miserable as I thought," he murmured. Sam blinked, caught off guard by the faint trace of amusement in his voice. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Nathan Sterling than she thought. That night, as Sam lay in bed, she thought about the locked door. She had to know what was behind it. So, when the penthouse was silent, she crept out of bed and tiptoed down the hall. Her heart pounded as she reached the door. And this time, she tried something different. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a hairpin. It took her 3 attempts. Then, click. The door creaked open. The room beyond was dimly lit, and what she saw made her freeze, because the walls were lined with photographs, dozens of them. Most of them were of a young boy, no older than 10. But it wasn't just any boy. Sam's breath caught in her throat, because that boy looked exactly like Nathan. And then, she saw the final picture, a funeral program. And suddenly, everything about Nathan Sterling made sense. The discovery of the locked room haunted Sam throughout the next day. The photographs, the funeral program, the unmistakable resemblance between Nathan and the boy in the pictures. There was so much more to this man than she had realized. And now that she had seen it, she couldn't just pretend she hadn't. But what could she do with this knowledge? For now, she would keep it to herself. That evening, Sam found herself restless. She had spent the day avoiding Nathan, unsure of how to act, now that she knew his secret. But fate had other plans. She was making tea in the kitchen when he suddenly appeared, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, his sleeves rolled up slightly, just enough to hint that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as put together as he always seemed. Nathan eyed her curiously. "You're quiet today," he observed. Sam kept her expression neutral. You say that like I'm usually loud. Nathan smirked. You are. She shrugged. Maybe I just don't feel like arguing with you today. Nathan narrowed his eyes slightly, as if trying to read her. Then, without another word, he poured himself a drink and walked toward the balcony. Sam hesitated for only a second before following him. The city stretched out below them, glittering with the warm glow of thousands of lights. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, have you ever lost someone? Sam asked. Breaking the silence, Nathan's grip on his glass tightened slightly. Everyone loses someone, he replied, his voice carefully controlled. Sam turned to face him. Yeah, but not everyone locks their grieving in a room and pretends it never happened. Nathan stilled. His eyes, usually so composed, flashed with something unreadable. For the first time since she met him, he looked genuinely caught off guard. You went into the rooms. Sam didn't deny it. I didn't mean to, she admitted. But I saw the pictures. I saw him. Nathan's jaw tensed. His usual cold mask returned instantly, but there was something different now, as if she had touched a nerve he didn't know he still had. That room is off limits, he said, his voice like ice. Sam studied him. Why? She challenged. Because it reminds you that you're still human? Nathan's grip on the balcony railing tightened. Drop it, Sam. But she didn't. You act like feelings are weaknesses, Nathan. Like if you ignore them long enough, they'll go away. But that's not how it works. Nathan turned to her, his eyes dark with something dangerous. You think you know me? His voice was low, controlled, but laced with an undercurrent of anger. Sam held his gaze. I think you're a man who's spent his whole life trying to outrun something he can't escape. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, electric. Then, Nathan suddenly turned away. Without another word, he walked back inside, leaving Sam alone on the balcony, the night air biting against her skin. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. She kept replaying their conversation in her mind. The way he reacted, the pain he tried to bury. She had seen it, just for a second, but it had been there. And now, she couldn't unsee it. At 2 a.m., she found herself wandering the penthouse, unable to shake the feeling that something was about to change. And then, a sound. From his office. Sam's pulse quickened as she followed the noise. When she reached the door, she saw Nathan sitting at his desk, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the other gripping an old photograph. He didn't notice her at first, but then, you don't give up, do you? His voice was tired. Sam hesitated. Not when I know there's something worth fighting for. Nathan let out a low, bitter laugh. That's where you and I are different, he murmured. I stopped believing in things worth fighting for a long time ago. Sam slowly stepped into the room. Then why do you want this baby? She asked. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Because an heir is different. How? Nathan met her gaze. Because it means something will exist beyond me, he said simply. Sam frowned. You mean without you? A flicker of emotion crossed his face. Yes, he admitted. Sam studied him carefully. You think legacy is the only thing that matters? Nathan leaned back in his chair. It's the only thing that doesn't disappear. Sam let out a quiet breath. That's not true, Nathan, she whispered. People don't disappear. Not if you let yourself remember them. Nathan looked away. The room fell into silence, and for the first time, Nathan Sterling had no response. As Sam turned to leave, Nathan suddenly spoke again. I had a brother, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Sam stopped in her tracks. He was 10 when he died. Sam turned back toward him. her heart aching at the rawness in his voice. His name was Ben. Sam swallowed hard. What happened? Nathan exhaled slowly. He drowned, he said finally. In our family's estate pool. And he hesitated. I was supposed to be watching him. Sam felt her chest tighten. Jesus, Nathan? Nathan didn't look at her. I don't talk about it, he said, his tone flat, detached. Ever. Sam took a slow step forward. You blame yourself. Nathan let out a bitter chuckle. My parents did too. Sam felt it then. The deep, unshakable wound that had shaped the man standing before her. And for the first time since meeting him, she understood why he was the way he was. He had built an empire out of control. Because the one time he had let go, he had lost everything. Sam took a deep breath, then reached for his hand. Nathan stiffened at the contact, but he didn't pull away. And for that night, they sat, in silence, not as a billionaire and a woman he had paid, but as two broken people who, for the first time in a long time, weren't completely alone. The weight of Nathan's confession hung in the air long after their conversation ended. Sam had never seen him like that before, so raw, so exposed. It unsettled her, not because it made her fear him, but because it made her care. And that was dangerous. The next morning, Nathan was back to his usual self, or at least he was trying to be. The cold mask was back in place, the distant billionaire who treated emotions as an unnecessary distraction. But Sam could see the cracks. Are you going to pretend last night didn't happen? She asked, crossing her arms as they sat across from each other at breakfast. Nathan barely looked up from his coffee. It was late. Sam raised an eyebrow. That's your excuse? Nathan exhaled, setting his cup down. You wanted to know something, I told you, he said evenly. That doesn't mean we need to make a habit of it. Sam scoffed. Wow. And here I was thinking we were having a real conversation for once. Nathan's jaw tensed. He hated this feeling of being seen. He wasn't used to it, didn't want to be used to it. Before Sam could push further, Eleanor Monroe, the ever-efficient assistant, stepped into the dining room. Mr. Sterling, she said, her tone professional. There's a situation that requires your attention. Nathan didn't hesitate. Handle it. Eleanor paused. It's about your father. Nathan froze. For a second, just a second, something flashed in his expression. Sam saw it. Then, just as quickly, he stood up, his voice sharp. I'll take it in my office. And just like that, he was gone. But Sam wasn't fooled. Whatever it wasn't just business. Nathan shut the door to his office behind him, his heart pounding in a way he hated. His father had no reason to contact him. Not after years of silence. Not after the last conversation they had. But here he was, staring at his phone, his father's name on the screen. Finally, he answered. You have 30 seconds before I hang up. A deep, measured voice responded. Is that any way to speak to your father? Nathan clenched his fist. You stopped being my father the day you buried Ben, and told me it should have been me instead. A beat of silence. Then, that was a long time ago. Nathan laughed bitterly. Not long enough. You still blame yourself, his father said. Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. You called for a reason. Get to it. His father exhaled. There's something you need to know. Nathan didn't care, didn't want to care. But then his father said the one thing that made his blood run cold. It's about Ben. Nathan's pulse stopped. What about him? There was a long pause before his father spoke again. You need to come home. Hours later, Sam sat in the penthouse's massive library, flipping through a book she wasn't actually reading. Nathan had been locked in his office all morning, and when he finally emerged, something was wrong. His shoulders were tense, his face was a mask of controlled emotion, and his eyes held something dark. "What happened?" she asked, watching as he poured himself a drink. Nathan didn't answer right away. Then, "I have to leave for a few days." Sam blinked. "You just got done telling me you control everything in your life," she said, sitting up straighter. "What's so urgent that it makes you drop everything?" Nathan hesitated. He never hesitated. "It's personal." Sam narrowed her eyes. "Does this have anything to do with Ben?" Nathan's jaw clenched. "Stay out of it, Sam." Sam's temper flared. "Are you serious? You let me in just a little last night, and now you expect me to just pretend none of it matters." Nathan exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't want you involved in this," he admitted. "It's not my problem," Sam cut in. "Yeah, I got that part." She stood up, brushing past him. Nathan caught her wrist before she could leave. "Sam?" She turned, meeting his gaze. Something in it made her stomach twist. "I need to do this alone," he said quietly. Sam swallowed. She should have told him fine, should have let him deal with his own demons. But instead, she said something she never expected to say. "Let me go with you." Nathan stared at her. For a second she thought he was going to laugh at the idea. But then, he just watched her. And finally he whispered, "I don't know if I can." Nathan left at dawn. Sam didn't go with him. But that didn't mean she wasn't going to find out the truth. She had spent enough time in Nathan's world to know one thing: money bought information. And she was about to dig deeper than she ever had before. Because whatever Nathan had just walked into, it wasn't just about his past. It was about who he was now. And Sam wasn't about to let him face it alone. Nathan Sterling had always been a man of precision and control. Every move he made was calculated, every decision rooted in logic. He had spent his entire life building walls that protected him from emotional distractions, from the vulnerability of human connection. But now, those walls were cracking. And the woman responsible for it? Samantha Hayes. The one thing he hadn't accounted for. Nathan returned from his trip late at night. Sam had been waiting. Though she'd never admit it. She had spent days worrying, pacing the penthouse, replaying their last conversation in her head. So when he finally walked through the door, her first instinct was to lash out. "Do you even know how to use a phone?" she snapped, arms crossed. Nathan set his briefcase down, exhaling sharply. "I told you not to get involved, Sam." "And I told you I don't take orders from you," she shot back. "Where the hell did you go?" Nathan hesitated. Then, "I went to see my father." Sam's breath hitched. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she stepped forward. "And?" Nathan's jaw tightened. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to expose the cracks in his armor. But something in the way Sam was looking at him, like she genuinely cared, made him say the words anyway. "He told me Ben's death wasn't an accident." Sam's stomach dropped. Nathan had always believed his brother's death was a tragic accident, a drowning, a moment of misfortune that no amount of money or power could undo. But now, that belief was shattered, and Nathan didn't know what to do with that information. Sam watched as he sat down, his usual sharp posture faltering. "Someone did this," he muttered. "Someone." He stopped, clenching his fists. Sam moved closer, cautiously. "Who?" she asked gently. Nathan's lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I will find out." Sam knew that look, the quiet, simmering rage beneath the surface. And she also knew. Once Nathan set his mind on something, He wouldn't stop until he had answers. The next day, Sam had her scheduled ultrasound appointment. She hadn't expected Nathan to come. He was too distracted, too lost in his own storm. But just as she was about to leave, a voice stopped her. "I'll drive you." She turned, surprised. Nathan stood at the door, his usual calm, composed expression in place. Sam raised an eyebrow. "You? Mr. I don't have time for emotional attachments, wants to come to a baby appointment?" Nathan simply shrugged. "Would you rather go alone?" Sam hesitated. Then, "Fine." But no glaring at the doctor. Nathan's lips twitched. "I make no promises." The doctor's office was too bright, the air thick with antiseptic. Sam lay back on the examination table, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure why she was so nervous. Maybe because this was real now. This wasn't just some contract. This was a life growing inside her. Nathan sat beside her, his arms crossed, his face impassive. But then, the doctor turned on the monitor. And suddenly, a sound filled the room. A steady, rhythmic heartbeat. Sam's breath caught. And Nathan, for the first time in his life, felt something he couldn't control. Nathan stared at the screen, completely still. The sound of the heartbeat was loud, almost deafening. It was his child, his heir. But in that moment, it didn't feel like an investment anymore. It felt different. Sam turned to him, watching his expression carefully. And for the first time since she met him, Nathan Sterling looked completely unguarded, vulnerable, human. The doctor smiled. "Everything looks great," she said. "Would you like to hear it again?" Sam nodded. But Nathan just kept staring at the screen, because for the first time in his entire life, he wasn't thinking about numbers, or contracts, or control. He was thinking about the future. The car ride back to the penthouse was silent. But it wasn't the usual cold silence that Nathan preferred. It was something heavier, something undeniable. Sam glanced at him. "You okay?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. Then, "I wasn't expecting that," he admitted. Sam let out a small laugh. "Yeah, well, babies have a way of ruining even the best laid plans." Nathan exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel. Sam could see the conflict in his eyes. He was scared, not of the baby, but of what it meant. That maybe, for the first time in his life, Nathan wanted something he couldn't buy. Later that night, Sam found something unexpected outside her bedroom door. A small package with a note. "For when you feel like drawing again." Inside, a brand new sketchbook and the highest quality charcoal pencils she had ever seen. Sam's heart clenched. She knew exactly who left it. And she also knew. Nathan Sterling wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just the cold-hearted millionaire who saw her as a contract. He was changing. And that terrified her more than anything. Nathan Sterling was a man who always had a plan. A man who thrived on order and predictability. A man who never let emotions interfere with his judgment. But lately, everything had started to unravel. And it terrified him. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just thinking about legacy. He was thinking about her. It started with small things. Nathan found himself lingering in the penthouse more often, making excuses to work from home. He started asking about Sam's health, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Even Eleanor noticed. "You haven't been in the office much lately," she remarked one afternoon, handing him a file. Nathan didn't look up. "Everything is being handled remotely?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "And that has nothing to do with the woman carrying your child?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Drop it, Eleanor." But Eleanor only smiled. "Of course. I'll pretend I don't see what's happening. Nathan shot her a warning glance, but deep down, he couldn't deny it. That evening, Sam sat on the penthouse balcony, sketchbook in hand. The city skyline stretched before her, lights flickering like stars against the darkness. She hadn't realized how much she missed drawing, how much she missed creating something that was hers. She was so lost in her sketch that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her. I didn't know you were so talented. Sam turned, startled. Nathan stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her work. She blinked. You're complimenting me? He smirked. Don't get used to it. Sam chuckled. She shouldn't feel comfortable around him. But lately the sharp edges between them had begun to soften. Nathan moved closer, glancing down at the drawing. It was a portrait. A baby, with soft, delicate features and large, curious eyes. You're already picturing them? He asked quietly. Sam swallowed hard. Yeah, it's hard not to. Nathan was silent for a moment. Then, to her surprise, he sat beside her. Neither of them spoke. But in that moment, something shifted. A quiet understanding, a connection that neither of them had expected. The next day, Sam received a message that sent chills down her spine. A number she hadn't seen in over a year. Eric. Her heart pounded as she read the text. We need to talk. Call me or I'll find you myself. Sam felt nauseous. It had been so long since she'd heard from him. She had assumed he was out of her life for good. She was wrong. Her hands shook as she deleted the message. She didn't need this. Didn't need him dragging her back into the nightmare she had escaped from. But deep down, she knew Eric wasn't going to let her go that easily. Sam tried to act normal, tried to pretend she wasn't on edge. But Nathan noticed everything. At dinner, he watched her too closely. You're distracted, he said. Sam forced a smile. I'm fine. Nathan's expression darkened. Don't lie to me, Sam. She hesitated. For a moment, she considered telling him. But then, would it even matter? Nathan had made it clear from the beginning that this was a business transaction. Would he even care? It's nothing, she muttered, looking away. Nathan didn't believe her, and Sam knew. This wasn't over. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, Eric's voice echoed in her head. She was standing by the window when she heard footsteps behind her. Who is he? Sam's breath caught. She turned. Nathan stood there, arms crossed, eyes like ice. She swallowed. What are you talking about? Nathan stepped closer. Who's the man you're hiding from? Sam's pulse spiked. I'm not hiding from anyone. Nathan's jaw clenched. Don't lie to me, Sam. Sam hated this, hated that he could see right through her, hated that part of her wanted to tell him everything. But she wasn't ready. She couldn't be that vulnerable. Drop it, Nathan, she whispered. For a moment he didn't move. Then, fine, he said coldly. But if he comes near you? He paused. Then softer. You tell me. Sam nodded slowly, but she wasn't sure if she would, because this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was his child's too. The next day, Nathan called Eleanor into his office. Find out who she's afraid of, he ordered. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. You're that concerned? Nathan exhaled sharply. I just want to know what we're dealing with. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Then she smirked. You care about her. Nathan's temper flared. This is a business arrangement. Eleanor just smiled. If you say so, boss. Sam went to a nearby cafe the next evening. She needed space, needed to breathe. But when she stepped outside, she froze. Eric was there, leaning against a lamppost, grinning like a predator. Hey, babe, he drawled. Sam's stomach twisted. Leave me alone, Eric. He took a step closer. Come on, Sam. Let's talk. She backed away. I have nothing to say to you. Eric's grin faded. That's too bad, he murmured. Because I know about your little arrangement with Sterling. Sam's blood ran cold. What? Eric smirked. You think I don't know? That rich bastard knocked you up, and now you're living the high life? Sam couldn't breathe. Stay away from me, Eric. Eric's smile vanished. You owe me, Sam. She turned to run. But then, a shadow moved behind her, and a familiar low voice cut through the night. No, Eric, Nathan said coldly. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. Sam's heart stopped. Nathan was here, and from the look in his eyes, Eric had just made the worst mistake of his life. The air between them was thick with tension. Nathan had seen a lot in his lifetime. Ruthless competitors, backstabbing business partners, power-hungry tycoons. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, for the rage that burned through his veins as he stared at the man standing before him. Eric Lawson, the man who had hurt Sam, the man who thought he could come back into her life. Nathan wouldn't allow it. And Eric, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Eric's cocky smirk didn't fade as he took a slow step forward. Wow, Sterling himself, he said, shoving his hands in his pockets. Didn't think you'd come running to save your girl? Nathan's jaw tightened. Walk away, Lawson, he said, his voice deadly calm. Eric chuckled. Why would I? This is between me and Sam. Nathan took another step forward, his tall frame towering over Eric. No, Eric. You lost that right a long time ago. Eric's smirk faltered. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed through his eyes. But he recovered quickly. He turned back to Sam, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Come on, babe. We used to be good together. Remember? Sam felt her stomach twist. I remember everything, she said, her voice sharp as glass. Eric's eyes darkened. Nathan noticed the shift instantly. He could see the tension in Eric's posture, the way his fingers twitched, the way his smirk had faded into something more sinister. Nathan's voice dropped. I won't warn you again, Lawson. Eric let out a slow exhale, shaking his head. Fine. Have it your way. He turned on his heel and walked away. But Nathan didn't miss the threat in his eyes before he disappeared. And he knew. This wasn't over. Nathan didn't speak as he led Sam back to the penthouse, his hands clenched into fists the entire ride. Sam stole glances at him, feeling the anger radiating off him in waves. She had never seen him like this, never seen him barely holding himself together. Finally, as they stepped into the penthouse, she couldn't hold back anymore. Nathan. But the moment the door shut, he whirled on her. You should have told me, he said, his voice low, controlled. But his eyes burned with fire. Sam flinched. That man, Nathan continued, stepping closer, is dangerous. And you were just going to handle this alone. Sam's pulse raced. She had expected anger, but she hadn't expected the undercurrent of something deeper. Something almost like fear. I didn't want to drag you into this, she said softly. Nathan exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. You think I wouldn't want to be involved? Sam hesitated. Nathan had always been detached, always been the man who kept business and emotions separate. But right now, he looked anything but detached. I don't know, she admitted. Nathan's jaw clenched. He stepped closer to cupping her face gently, something he had never done before. Sam, listen to me, he said, his voice intense. You're carrying my child. That means you're my responsibility. Sam's breath hitched. Responsibility? Of course. This wasn't about her. It was about the baby. She pulled away. Right, she muttered, looking away. Of course. Nathan frowned. Sam. But she was already walking away, her mind spinning. And Nathan? He stood there watching her go. And for the first time he realized this wasn't just about responsibility. This was about her. And that terrified him. The next day, Nathan made a call. A call to someone he never thought he'd need. Someone who worked in the shadows. When the call was answered, a deep voice spoke. Nathan Sterling. To what do I owe the pleasure? Nathan didn't bother with pleasantries. I need information, he said. On a man named Eric Lawson. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You don't ask for small favors, do you? Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. Can you do it or not? Another chuckle. Consider it done. I'll be in touch. Nathan ended the call, and as he stared out the window at the city below, he promised himself one thing. Eric Lawson would never come near Sam again. Meanwhile, Sam sat in her room, her heart heavy. She couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Couldn't ignore the way she felt when Nathan had touched her. The way her pulse skipped when his voice dropped into that low, protective tone. She had tried to keep her distance, tried to remind herself that this was just a contract, but it wasn't just about the baby anymore. And it scared her. Because falling for Nathan Sterling, that was a mistake she wasn't sure she could afford. 2 nights later, Nathan received a file. It was thick, full of Eric's crimes, debts, and secrets. Nathan read every word, and by the time he was done, he was furious. This wasn't just a man trying to win back an ex. This was a man who had connections to dangerous people. Nathan clenched his jaw. He had let this go on long enough. The next time Eric Lawson showed his face, Nathan wouldn't be warning him. He would be ending this. For good. The night was thick with tension. Nathan stood alone in his study, staring at the city skyline. The file on Eric Lawson sat open on his desk, filled with evidence of his crimes, blackmail, fraud, and worse. Nathan had seen men like Eric before. Men who thrived in the shadows. Men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Not this time. Nathan wasn't just protecting his child anymore. He was protecting Sam. And that meant Eric had just made a very dangerous mistake. Downstairs, Sam sat curled on the couch, absently rubbing her stomach. Her mind was a storm of emotions. Nathan had barely spoken to her all day. Ever since that encounter with Eric, he had been distant, colder. And Sam? She was tired of feeling like a problem to be solved. She wanted to talk to him, to understand what was going on. But every time she tried, Nathan would just say, "Don't worry about it." And that only made her worry more. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She marched up to his study, knocked once, and then pushed the door open. Nathan looked up from his desk. His eyes were shadowed, tired. But when he saw Sam standing there, arms crossed, fire in her gaze, his expression hardened. "We need to talk," she said. Nathan sighed. "Sam, now isn't... I don't care if now isn't a good time," she snapped. "You've been shutting me out all day, and I want to know why." Nathan clenched his jaw. He stood up, walking to the window, his back to her. "This isn't something you should be involved in." Sam laughed bitterly. "Really? Because the last time I checked, this involves me a lot." Nathan turned to face her. "Eric is dangerous." Sam froze. "I know," she said quietly. Nathan took a step closer. "You don't understand, Sam. He's more than just some jealous ex. He's got connections. He's done things that could put you in real danger." Sam's stomach twisted. "Then why haven't we gone to the police?" Nathan exhaled slowly. "Because I don't trust the system to handle this fast enough. And I'm not going to sit around waiting for him to make another move." There was something dark in his voice, something cold. And Sam knew. Nathan wasn't just talking about defending himself. He was talking about destroying Eric. Sam swallowed. You're planning something, aren't you? Nathan didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than words. Sam took a deep breath. Nathan, listen to me, she said. I don't want this to turn into some revenge game. I just want to be safe. That's it. Nathan's eyes softened. Just a fraction. You will be safe, he promised. But I can't let him walk away from this. Sam hesitated. She knew Nathan wasn't a violent man, but he was a man who got what he wanted. And right now, he wanted Eric gone. Just promise me you won't do anything reckless, she whispered. Nathan stepped closer. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. I promise, he said. But the way he said it, Sam wasn't sure if she believed him. Later that night, Nathan received a text. It was from his investigator. Unknown number. Eric is getting desperate. He's planning something. You need to move fast. Nathan gritted his teeth. He had expected this, but he hadn't expected how quickly things would escalate. There was no more waiting. He picked up his phone and made a call. A deep voice answered. You ready? Yes. Nathan's voice was ice cold. Yes. Make sure he knows what happens when he crosses me. He ended the call. Then he turned to the door. Sam was standing there, and she had heard everything. Sam's face was pale, her arms wrapped protectively around her stomach. Nathan, what are you doing? Nathan's jaw clenched. I'm handling it. Sam shook her head. This isn't how we fix things. Nathan took a step forward. This is how I make sure you and our child are safe. Sam's heart pounded. You're scaring me. Nathan froze. His face twisted into something pained, as if he had just been hit. I would never hurt you, he said, his voice low, urgent. Sam blinked back tears. I know, but that's not what I'm afraid of. Nathan exhaled, and in that moment, he saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't just fear Eric. She feared what Nathan was becoming, and that hit harder than any punch. Sam took a deep breath. I need to think, she said. Nathan's hands curled into fists. You're leaving? I don't know, she admitted. I just know that if I stay here, watching you do this, I'm going to lose myself. Nathan's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong. But the truth was, she was right, and he had no idea how to fix it. Nathan had never felt powerless before. But as he stood in the middle of his penthouse, silent, empty, cold, he realized something. Power, money, control. None of it mattered if Sam wasn't here. She had walked away. And for the first time in his life, Nathan didn't know how to bring someone back. Nathan spent days searching for Sam. His investigators traced her last movements, a bus ticket, a motel outside the city. But then, the trail went cold. She doesn't want to be found, Eleanor said gently. Nathan gritted his teeth. I don't care. Find her. Eleanor sighed. Nathan, maybe she just needs time. Nathan hated that answer, because time was the one thing he wasn't used to giving. He had built his entire life around getting results instantly. But Sam was different, and he had pushed her away. Sam sat on a worn-out couch in a small apartment. She had taken a small rental under a fake name, avoiding contact with everyone, including Nathan. Her heart ached for him, but she had to protect herself, protect their child, because as much as she loved Nathan, she couldn't be with a man who let revenge consume him. She placed a hand over her stomach. I don't know if I made the right choice, she whispered. She missed him, more than anything. But could she go back? Would he ever change? One evening, Nathan sat in his office, staring at the contract, the one Sam had signed months ago, the contract that had started everything. Now, it felt meaningless. His fingers tightened around the paper. Then, in a sudden burst of rage, he ripped it in half. Eleanor walked in, just as the pieces fell to the floor. Nathan wasn't the same man anymore, and it terrified him. "You don't have to destroy everything," Eleanor said softly. Nathan let out a bitter laugh. "It's already destroyed." The next morning, Nathan's phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You need to come to the hospital. It's about Sam." Nathan's blood turned ice cold. Without a second thought, he ran out the door. At the hospital, Nathan found Dr. Carter waiting for him. "She's stable, but there's something you need to know." Nathan's stomach twisted. "What happened?" The doctor hesitated. "She had complications, but the babies are fine." Nathan froze. "Babies? Not one. Two." Nathan stepped into the hospital room. Sam lay in bed, looking tired, fragile, but alive. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered. Nathan swallowed hard. "You're having twins." Sam nodded. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. Then, softly, "Why didn't you tell me?" Sam's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I didn't know if you'd be the man they needed." Nathan felt that, like a punch to the chest. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. Nathan sat beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't demand an explanation. He just sat there. And after a long silence, he finally spoke. "I don't care how long it takes. I will prove to you that I can be the man you need." Sam looked at him, and in that moment, she saw something different in his eyes. Not control, not power, just love. And for the first time, she let herself hope. Nathan had always believed in control. Control over his life, control over his business, control over every aspect of his future. But now, as he stood outside Sam's hospital room, watching her sleep, he realized he had lost all control. And for the first time in his life, he didn't care. The next morning, Nathan sat in the hospital lobby, flipping through the contract. The same legally binding document that had defined their arrangement. Every word, every clause, every carefully planned term. All of it felt meaningless now. He had spent his life calculating risk, mitigating damage, ensuring outcomes. But this wasn't business. This was real. And real things couldn't be controlled. So, for the first time in his life, Nathan made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy. He pulled out his pen, took a deep breath, and tore the contract in half. When Sam woke up, she found Nathan sitting at her bedside, his expression unreadable. She blinked. "What are you doing here?" Nathan exhaled. "I'm not leaving." Sam's heart skipped a beat. "You don't have to do this, Nathan. You got what you wanted. An heir. Two, actually." Nathan shook his head. "I was wrong. I didn't just want an heir, Sam. I want—" He hesitated. "I want a family." Sam looked away. "You can't just decide that now." Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out the torn contract. Sam's breath hitched. She stared at the shredded paper, disbelief washing over her. "It doesn't matter anymore," Nathan interrupted. His voice was steady but raw. "None of it matters if you're not in my life." Tears welled in Sam's eyes. "Nathan, you don't know how to love. You don't know how to choose people over business." Nathan reached for her hand, his fingers trembling. "Then teach me." The following days were a test of everything Nathan had never done before. He didn't rush Sam. He didn't pressure her for an answer. Instead, he showed up. Every day. He brought her favorite tea in the morning. He sat beside her at every doctor's appointment. He even tried to make her laugh. And sometimes he succeeded. Eleanor, watching from the sidelines, raised an eyebrow one day. "I never thought I'd see the day Nathan Sterling willingly sits in a hospital waiting room for hours," she teased. Nathan didn't even look up. "I never thought I'd want to," he admitted. And that was the difference. But Sam wasn't the only one he had to prove himself to. One evening, Nathan drove to a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn. He parked outside a modest brownstone and stared at the door for a long time. Then he knocked. A moment later, an older woman answered. She had sharp eyes, streaks of silver in her hair, and a lifetime of wisdom etched into her face. It was his mother. "Mom," Nathan said, his voice softer than it had been in years. His mother folded her arms. "Why are you here, Nathan?" Nathan swallowed hard. "Because I need to understand. I need to know why you left." For years, he had buried the pain of his childhood, the neglect, the abandonment, the deep-seated belief that love was conditional, fragile, temporary. His mother sighed, motioning for him to come inside. "You're finally ready to listen?" she asked. Nathan nodded, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from the past. He was facing it. As Nathan sat in his mother's living room, he listened to a story he had spent decades avoiding. His father had been a ruthless businessman, just like him. Cold, calculated, distant. But his mother, she had been different. She had wanted a family, real love. "And when I realized your father would never choose love over power," she said, her voice heavy with regret, "I had to make a choice. I left. But I regret leaving you behind every single day." Nathan closed his eyes. For years he had believed his mother had left because she didn't care. But now he realized she had left because she did. And in that moment, Nathan finally understood. He had a choice, too. Nathan returned to the hospital that night, his heart lighter but his mind clear. He found Sam sitting by the window, looking out at the city lights. She turned when he entered. "You okay?" she asked. Nathan exhaled. "For the first time in a long time. Yeah." Sam studied him for a long moment. Then, she finally said it. "You really tore up the contract." Nathan nodded. "And I'd do it again." Sam smiled softly. "You know that means nothing's holding me here, right?" Nathan stepped closer. "I know." "And you're okay with that?" Nathan hesitated. Then he reached for her hand. "I don't want a contract to keep you, Sam. I just want you to stay." Sam's heart clenched. Because this was different. This was real. And maybe, just maybe, she could stay. Nathan had never felt fear. Not when he made million-dollar deals. Not when he walked into a boardroom full of powerful men, ready to devour him. Not when he built his empire from the ground up. But this, standing in the hospital room, watching Sam hold their newborn twins, this terrified him. Nathan had imagined this day countless times. He had pictured signing birth certificates, handling logistics, and ensuring the transition was seamless. What he hadn't expected was the overwhelming rush of emotion as he looked at the two fragile lives in Sam's arms. She was exhausted, her hair slightly damp from sweat, her cheeks flushed, but she had never looked more beautiful. And in her arms, two tiny, perfect babies, a boy and a girl, his children. Nathan swallowed, stepping closer. "Can I?" Sam looked up at him, her tired eyes searching his face. Then she nodded. Nathan sat on the edge of the hospital bed as Sam gently placed their son in his arms. The baby was so small, his tiny fingers curling into a fist. Nathan had held millions of dollars, had signed contracts that changed the world, but nothing compared to holding his son for the first time. A breath he hadn't realized he was holding finally escaped his lips. He's... Nathan's voice broke. Perfect, Sam whispered. Nathan nodded, unable to speak. Then she handed him their daughter. She was even smaller than her brother, but just as perfect. Her tiny face scrunched up before relaxing again, completely trusting the arms that held her. Nathan looked up at Sam. "How did we do this?" he asked, voice thick with emotion. Sam let out a breathless laugh. "I have no idea." But they had. And now, everything was different. Sam watched Nathan carefully. She had expected him to be present, but she hadn't expected this. The way he looked at the babies, the way his entire body softened when they moved, the way he held them as if they were his entire world. But there was something else too. Something hesitant, something afraid. "You're thinking too much," Sam murmured. Nathan let out a quiet chuckle. "That obvious?" Sam nodded. Nathan sighed, adjusting his hold on the babies. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. Sam blinked, surprised by the honesty. "I don't either," she said softly. "We'll figure it out together." Nathan met her gaze, and for the first time, he believed her. Bringing the babies home wasn't the seamless transition Nathan had hoped for. It was chaotic. The twins had opposite sleeping schedules. One was always crying while the other slept. And Nathan? Nathan was completely out of his element. Sam, on the other hand, adapted quickly. She learned the baby's different cries, knew exactly how to soothe them, and somehow managed to function on almost no sleep. Nathan watched her, amazed. "How are you doing this?" he asked one night, as she rocked their son back to sleep. Sam gave him a tired smile. Trial and error. Nathan ran a billion-dollar company, but this felt harder. Still, he refused to fail. So he learned how to change a diaper, how to warm a bottle, how to hold both babies at once when they refused to be put down. And each night, when Sam finally collapsed into bed, Nathan would stand over the cribs and watch them breathe, because he still couldn't believe they were his, that they were real. One evening, after the babies had finally settled, Nathan found Sam standing on the terrace, staring at the city skyline. He walked up beside her, their shoulders brushing. "You okay?" he asked. Sam let out a long breath. "Yeah, just thinking." Nathan waited. Then, "I was so sure I'd have to do this alone," she admitted. Nathan's chest tightened. "But you're not," he said quietly. Sam finally turned to face him. "Are you sure?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "Yes." She searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt. There was none. And for the first time, she let herself believe it. Nathan had never been good with words. He had built his entire life on contracts, negotiations, numbers. But this wasn't a deal. This was a promise. One night, after an exhausting day, he found Sam curled up on the couch, fast asleep, with one of the twins sleeping on her chest. And in that moment, Nathan knew. He didn't want her to stay just because of the babies. He wanted her to stay because she wanted to, because she wanted him. So the next morning, as Sam fed the babies in the nursery, Nathan walked in, holding a small velvet box. Sam glanced up. "What's that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Nathan took a deep breath. "A question I should have asked a long time ago." Sam's eyes widened as Nathan knelt beside her. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. Nathan held her gaze. "I want to." Sam stared at him, her heart pounding. "But..." Nathan shook his head. "I love you, Sam." Sam's breath caught. Not because of the twins, Not because of a contract, not because it's the right thing to do. He swallowed hard. I love you because you changed everything for me. And I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it. Tears filled Sam's eyes. Nathan, I know I've made mistakes, and I know I still have a lot to learn, but I want to do this with you, for real. He took a deep breath. Marry me, Sam. A tear slipped down Sam's cheek. She looked at the babies, their babies, then back at Nathan, the man she had once thought incapable of love, and she smiled. Yes. Nathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then he reached for her, pulling her into a deep, unmistakably real kiss. For the first time in his life, Nathan Sterling wasn't afraid of love, because he had finally found it. The moment Nathan tore up the contract, Sam's entire world shifted. For months, she had lived under the weight of a legally binding agreement, knowing that when the time came, she would walk away. She had told herself she was ready. She wasn't. And now, staring at the torn pieces of paper on the floor, she wasn't sure whether to breathe in relief or run. Nathan watched her carefully. She had been so sure he would let her go, that he would stick to the deal, allow her to take the money and move on. But he couldn't. Sam, Nathan said, voice steady yet urgent. Stay. Sam swallowed. This isn't what we agreed to, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I know, Nathan said, and I don't care. He stepped closer. I don't want this to be a contract anymore. I don't want this to be about transactions and obligations. His voice softened. I want us. Sam's heart pounded in her chest. Why now? She whispered. Why are you doing this now? Nathan exhaled, rubbing a hand through his hair. Because for the first time in my life, he admitted, I'm afraid of losing something that money can't replace. Sam felt a tear slip down her cheek. Because that was it, wasn't it? She had never been something he could buy. And now, Nathan Sterling had finally figured that out. Sam's instinct was to say no, to walk away, to protect herself before she let herself fall any deeper. But the way Nathan looked at her, the way he had changed, the way he held their babies as if they were his entire world. She had spent her whole life running. Was it finally time to stop? She shook her head, struggling to think through the emotions drowning her. Nathan, she whispered, I don't know if I can. Nathan's jaw clenched. Then let me prove it to you, he said. No contracts, no conditions, just you and me. Sam let out a breathless, shaky laugh. You don't know how to love someone, Nathan. Nathan stepped even closer. But I know how to fight for someone, he said. Sam's chest tightened. And for the first time, she wanted to let him. Nathan reached for her hands. Sam, he said quietly, what are you afraid of? Sam swallowed. Everything. Of being discarded. Of not being enough. Of falling in love with him. And watching him change his mind. She hesitated, trying to find the words. Nathan squeezed her hands. I know I don't deserve an easy answer, he said. But just tell me what you're thinking. Sam closed her eyes for a moment. Then, I don't want to be a mistake you regret, she admitted. Nathan's expression broke. He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. That's not possible, he said, his voice thick. Sam's eyes burned with emotion. But how do I know that? She asked, voice trembling. How do I know this isn't just another decision you think you can control? What happens if I stay and you realize I was just a phase? Nathan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Because I don't make decisions unless I'm sure, he said, his voice unwavering. And Sam? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. Sam's breath hitched. And in that moment, she knew. She had two choices: walk away or stay and let herself believe in him. Sam inhaled deeply. Then she nodded. Nathan froze. "You're staying?" he asked, as if he wasn't sure he had heard her right. Sam let out a quiet, shaky laugh. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm staying." Nathan let out a breath of relief and pulled her into his arms. For a moment, Sam let herself collapse against him, feeling the weight of every doubt, every fear, every hesitation fade away. Nathan pressed his forehead against hers. "You won't regret this," he promised. Sam smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We'll see." And for the first time in years, she felt hope. The next few weeks were a new kind of reality. There were no legal documents binding them together. No set rules, no expectations, only Nathan and Sam, learning how to build something real. Nathan took time off work. For the first time in years, he wasn't buried in deals, meetings, or numbers. Instead, he learned how to change diapers, how to rock the twins to sleep, how to wake up at 3 a.m. to feed them. And Sam? Sam watched in awe as the man who had once been all about control and calculation became a father, became the man she had always hoped he could be. And slowly, piece by piece, she let herself love him back. One night, after the twins had finally settled, Nathan and Sam found themselves on the terrace, looking out at the city skyline. "You know," Nathan said, breaking the silence, "I used to think love was a liability." Sam raised an eyebrow. "That sounds about right." Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "But now?" He turned to her. "Now, I know it's the only thing that actually matters." Sam swallowed hard. She knew where this was going. Nathan pulled something from his pocket. But it wasn't a ring. It was the original contract. Sam frowned. "I thought you tore that up." Nathan smirked. "This is a copy," he admitted. Then, right in front of her, he set it on fire. Sam gasped as the flames curled up the paper, turning it to ashes in his palm. "I don't want a contract with you, Sam," Nathan said, voice steady. "I want a life with you." Sam's breath caught. Nathan tossed the last bit of the contract over the terrace railing, watching it disappear into the night. Then he turned to her. "So," he said, giving her a small smile. "What do you say?" Sam exhaled, shaking her head. "You're impossible," she murmured. Nathan grinned. "That's not a no." Sam laughed, shaking her head. "No, it's not," she said, stepping closer. Nathan cupped her face. "Then let's build something real," he whispered. And Sam, for the first time in her life, the Sterling mansion, once a place of cold transactions and business deals, now held a warmth that had never existed before. The contract that once defined Sam and Nathan's relationship was gone. But could love truly replace it? That question loomed over them, like an unspoken fear. Because now, without rules, without conditions, they had to figure out what came next. For the first time, Sam wasn't just staying at the mansion. She was living there. The walls didn't feel as suffocating anymore. She didn't feel like a temporary guest in Nathan's world. But with the absence of the contract, a new problem arose. What were they now? Nathan hadn't asked her to marry him. She hadn't told him she loved him yet. And without a legal obligation keeping them together, would he wake up one day and change his mind? Nathan sensed the hesitation in Sam. She was here, yes, but he could feel the distance in her mind. One night, while rocking one of the twins to sleep, Nathan finally spoke. "Do you regret staying?" Sam froze. The question was so unexpected, she didn't know how to answer. She looked away. "I don't know how to be in this without expecting it to end." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving, Sam," he said. Neither are you. Sam sighed. But what if one day you wake up and realize this isn't what you wanted? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan set the baby down gently before turning to her. That's never going to happen, he said firmly. But if you need me to prove it, I will. Every day. Sam swallowed hard because she wanted to believe him. She just didn't know if she could. While Sam was struggling internally, the outside world was beginning to notice. Nathan Sterling, New York's most powerful financier, had gone silent. No public appearances, no business scandals, no new deals. Instead, he was spending time at home, with her. The media wasn't used to this version of him, and neither were his investors. At first, Nathan ignored the growing rumors. But when he got a call from the board of Sterling Enterprises, everything changed. Nathan rarely took meetings at home. But this one, he couldn't ignore. The board sat in his private office, expressions stern and unreadable. Your absence has been noted, one of them said. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Is there an issue with how I'm running my company? No, another member admitted. But there is concern about distractions. Nathan's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what they meant. Sam, are you suggesting that I need to choose between my personal life and my company? Nathan asked, his tone dangerously low. Not at all, the first man said. But we'd like assurance that certain personal choices won't affect the Sterling brand. Nathan laughed coldly. You think the woman I love is a liability? The room fell silent, because this was the first time Nathan had admitted it, even to himself. And now that the words were out there, he knew there was no taking them back. Sam hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when she heard Nathan's voice from the hallway, she couldn't stop herself. She pressed her hand against the doorframe, her heart pounding. The woman I love. Nathan had said it so effortlessly, as if he had always known, as if it wasn't the most terrifying thing in the world. Tears burned her eyes, because he had said it to them, before he had even said it to her. And that broke her. Nathan found Sam sitting in their room later that night. He could tell immediately that something was wrong. Talk to me, he said. Sam let out a breathless laugh. You love me? She asked. Nathan stilled. Yes, he said without hesitation. Sam's chest tightened. Then why did I have to hear it from a room full of businessmen before I heard it from you? Nathan's lips parted slightly, realization dawning. He ran a hand through his hair. Sam, that's not... You don't even know what love is, she cut in, her voice shaking. Nathan's expression darkened. You think I don't know what I feel. I think you don't know how to deal with it, she shot back. Nathan took a step forward. Then, teach me, he said, his voice softer now. Because I don't want to lose you. Sam felt a tear slip down her cheek. Then stop treating me like something you have to manage. Nathan sighed deeply, stepping closer. I'm trying, he admitted. But I need you to meet me halfway. Sam bit her lip, hesitating. Then, she nodded. And just like that, the storm passed. But the battle, it was far from over. Nathan knew Sam wasn't ready for marriage. But he also knew one thing. He wanted forever with her. So he didn't propose with a ring. He proposed with a promise. One night, as they sat on the terrace, watching the city lights, Nathan took Sam's hand. I don't need you to marry me tomorrow, he said. Sam turned to him, startled. But I need you to know, he continued, that I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Sam's throat tightened. You want forever with me? She whispered. Nathan squeezed her hand. I already have forever with you, he said. Sam closed her eyes, her heart fuller than it had ever been. And for the first time, She believed it. The Sterling mansion stood as a symbol of legacy and power. But for Nathan Sterling, it now represented something far greater. Not wealth, not control, not reputation, but family. And today, as the golden sunlight poured into the grand estate, a new chapter was about to begin, one that Nathan never expected, but one he knew he could never live without. Nathan had always been a man of decisiveness. Business deals, he handled them with precision. High-stakes negotiations, he thrived on them. But planning a wedding, that was an entirely different battlefield. "I don't understand why we need centerpieces," Nathan muttered as he sat in a boardroom-like setting. Except this was no boardroom. It was their wedding planning session. Sam, sitting across from him, barely held back a laugh. "Because, Mr. Sterling," she teased, "apparently weddings require flowers. Who knew?" Nathan exhaled sharply, his frustration clear. "Why does it feel like I have less control over this than a billion-dollar merger?" Eleanor, who had miraculously agreed to help with the planning, smirked. "Because, Nathan, this isn't a business deal. This is a wedding. And in this case," she glanced at Sam, "she's the CEO." Nathan turned to Sam. "Are you the CEO of this wedding?" Sam grinned. "Obviously." Nathan sighed in defeat. And just like that, the once powerful businessman was officially outnumbered. As the wedding day drew closer, Sam found herself struggling with emotions she couldn't quite name. She loved Nathan, she knew that, but the idea of stepping into a world she didn't belong to, it terrified her. One evening, as she sat in the nursery watching the twins sleep, Eleanor entered quietly. "You're thinking of running, aren't you?" Sam's breath caught. She turned to Eleanor, eyes wide. "What? No, I don't know." Eleanor sat beside her. "You know," she mused, "I've worked for Nathan for a long time. I've seen him build an empire, make impossible decisions, and take down men twice as ruthless as him." Sam swallowed, unsure where this was going. "But the only time I've ever seen him truly afraid," Eleanor continued, "is when he thought you might walk away." Sam blinked. Eleanor gave her a knowing look. "So, if you're thinking about running, Sam, don't. Because that man, he doesn't just love you, he needs you." Sam let out a shaky breath, and for the first time she realized, so did she. It was supposed to be a perfect day. Instead, it started in chaos. Nathan had lost his cufflinks. The caterer had messed up the menu. And worst of all, Sam was nowhere to be found. Nathan, already dressed in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, stood in the middle of the grand hall, a mixture of panic and frustration on his face. "Eleanor," he barked. "Where is she?" Eleanor, for once, looked genuinely nervous. "She said she needed a moment," she admitted. Nathan's heart pounded. A moment, or an escape. Sam stood in the bridal suite, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked beautiful, she looked like a bride. But was she ready? "Okay. Breathe," she muttered. "You love him. He loves you. It's that simple, right?" A soft knock on the door startled her. She turned and saw Nathan, still in his tux, still looking as powerful as ever. But his eyes, they were soft and full of something she had never seen in him before. Vulnerability. "I thought you might run," he admitted, stepping inside. Sam let out a breathless laugh. "I thought about it," she confessed. Nathan didn't flinch. "But then I realized," she continued, "that I don't want to spend my life running anymore." Nathan exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Then marry me," he whispered. Sam's throat tightened. She reached for his hand and nodded. "Okay." The ceremony was intimate. Despite Nathan's status, they had chosen family and close friends over the press and spectacle. As they stood before the officiant, their fingers entwined, Nathan spoke first. "Before you," he said, "I didn't believe in love." Sam's eyes glistened. "I believed in business, in control, in making things happen on my terms." A small smile tugged at his lips. "And then you happened." Sam laughed softly, her heart full. "You walked into my life, turned everything upside down, and made me realize that the best things in life can't be controlled. They can only be felt." Nathan took a deep breath. "And I feel you, Sam. Every moment, every day, for the rest of my life." Sam's tears spilled. She could barely find her voice, so she did the only thing she could. She kissed him, and just like that, they were husband and wife. The years passed, but some things never changed. The twins grew up surrounded by love. Nathan still tried to control everything, and Sam still made sure he didn't. But above all, they had each other. One afternoon, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Nathan took Sam's hand. "You know," he said, "I never actually believed I could be happy like this." Sam turned to him, smiling. And now, Sam let out a breathless laugh. "I thought about it," she confessed. Nathan didn't flinch. "But then I realized," she continued, "that I don't want to spend my life running anymore." Nathan exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Then marry me," he whispered. Sam's throat tightened. She reached for his hand and nodded. "Okay." The ceremony was intimate. Despite Nathan's status, they had chosen family and close friends over the press and spectacle. As they stood before the officiant, their fingers entwined, Nathan spoke first. "Before you," he said, "I didn't believe in love." Sam's eyes glistened. "I believed in business, in control, in making things happen on my terms." A small smile tugged at his lips. "And then you happened." Sam laughed softly, her heart full. "You walked into my life, turned everything upside down, and made me realize that the best things in life can't be controlled. They can only be felt." Nathan took a deep breath. "And I feel you, Sam. Every moment, every day, for the rest of my life." Sam's tears spilled. She could barely find her voice, so she did the only thing she could. She kissed him, and just like that, they were husband and wife. The years passed, but some things never changed. The twins grew up surrounded by love. Nathan still tried to control everything, and Sam still made sure he didn't. But above all, they had each other. One afternoon, as they sat on the terrace, watching the sunset, Nathan took Sam's hand. "You know," he said, "I never actually believed I could be happy like this." Sam turned to him, smiling. "And now?" Nathan looked at her, at their children playing in the distance, at the life they had built together. "Now," he said, "I wouldn't trade this for anything." Sam leaned into him, her heart full. "Good," she whispered, "because neither would I." And as the sky turned golden, Nathan Sterling, the man who once thought love was a liability, knew without a doubt that love was the greatest investment he had ever made. Did you expect Nathan to change the way he did? Did Sam make the right choice by staying? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what part of their story moved you the most. And if you love stories that challenge the heart, stir emotions, and keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because trust me, the next story is one you won't want to miss. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.